The neon sign outside the Golden Velvet nightclub buzzed with an irritating electric hum that seemed to vibrate through my skull as I balanced 3 glasses of expensive whiskey on my silver tray. Each step across the polished marble floor sent a dull ache through my lower back, the kind that had become my constant companion over the past few weeks. The club's signature scent of expensive cologne, cigarette smoke, and something floral hung heavy in the air, mixing with the metallic taste of nervous exhaustion that had settled permanently on my tongue. I had been working double shifts at the Golden Velvet for 3 months now, ever since I'd lost my day job at the insurance office. The pay was better here, even if the clientele made my skin crawl. Rich men in $1,000 suits who looked at me like I was part of the furniture, their eyes lingering too long on my uniform's fitted black dress. Tonight felt different, though. There was an electric tension in the air that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. "Table 12 needs refills," Marcus, the floor manager, called out as he rushed past me, his usually calm demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "And Vanessa? Be extra careful with this group. They're important." Important. That word had been thrown around a lot tonight. Important enough that Marcus had personally escorted the men to the VIP section in the back, the area usually reserved for celebrities and politicians. Important enough that he'd specifically asked me to handle their table, despite my relatively short tenure at the club. I nodded, adjusting my grip on the tray as I made my way toward the back section. The lighting grew dimmer here, all amber shadows in private corners. The bass from the main floor's music thumped through the walls, but it felt muted, distant. This was where the real business happened, where conversations were conducted in whispers and handshakes, sealed deals worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. Table 12 sat in the corner, partially hidden by a gauzy curtain that provided the illusion of privacy, while allowing discreet observation from the rest of the room. As I approached, I could hear fragments of conversation in accented English, words that didn't quite reach my ears, but carried the weight of serious business. "Gentlemen," I said softly, setting the fresh drinks on the polished black table. "Is there anything else I can get for you this evening?" The 3 men looked up at me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. They weren't the usual corporate executives or entertainment industry players I was used to serving. These men had an edge to them, a dangerous quality that seemed to radiate from their very presence. The one in the center, older than the others with graying hair and cold blue eyes, studied me with an intensity that made my mouth go dry. "Actually, there is something," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "You've been watching us all evening." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm sorry, sir, but I was just doing my job. If I've made you uncomfortable." Uncomfortable! The man to his left, younger with dark hair and a scar running along his jawline, let out a harsh laugh. "That's rich. She thinks she's making us uncomfortable." The alcohol on their breath was strong, and their eyes had the glassy sheen of men who'd been drinking for hours. I took a small step back, my instincts screaming that something was very wrong. "We know who you are," the older man continued, leaning forward. "We know what you're really doing here." "I don't understand," I stammered, my hands beginning to tremble. "I'm just a waitress. I'm just trying to do my job." "Waitress?" the third man spat, his voice thick with contempt. "You think we're stupid? You think we don't know a spy when we see one?" The word hit me like a physical blow. Spy? What were they talking about? I'd never been a spy in my life. I could barely keep track of drink orders, let alone engage in espionage. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake," I said, my voice growing smaller with each word. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never—" "Don't lie to us," the scarred man barked, rising from his seat so quickly that his chair scraped against the floor. "We've been watching you, taking pictures, listening to conversations, reporting back to your handlers." "Please," I whispered, backing away from the table as all three men stood. "Please, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a spy. I just need this job. I have bills to pay. You've been asking questions," the older man accused, his voice growing louder. "Questions about our business, about our associates. Don't deny it." Other patrons in the VIP section were beginning to stare now, drawn by the raised voices and obvious confrontation. I could see Marcus hovering near the entrance, uncertainty written across his face. Should he intervene? Should he call security? These were important clients after all. "I haven't asked any questions," I protested, my voice breaking. "I swear to you, I don't know anything about your business. I don't want to know anything about your business." The three men began to circle around me, their movement predatory and coordinated. The scent of their cologne mixed with alcohol created a suffocating cloud that made it hard to breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "Lying little bitch," one of them snarled. "You think you can play innocent? You think you can fool us?" "Please don't hurt me," I whispered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Please. I'm not what you think I am. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to make enough money to pay rent." That's when I heard it. A voice cutting through the chaos, commanding and absolute. "Stop." The single word seemed to freeze everyone in place. The three men stopped their advance, their heads turning toward the source of the voice like marionettes controlled by the same string. I followed their gaze and saw him. He stood near the entrance to the VIP section, tall and imposing in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit. His dark hair was styled with precision, and his face was the kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers, if not for the dangerous edge in his dark eyes. Everything about him radiated power and control, from his confident posture to the way everyone in the room seemed to unconsciously defer to his presence. "Leave her alone," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. The older man who had been leading the confrontation straightened immediately. "Mr. Romano, we were just—" I said stop. Victor Romano, I somehow knew that was his name without being told, moved closer, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. "The lady is under my protection now." Protection. The word should have brought relief, but something about the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't a rescue. This was a claiming. "But sir," the scarred man protested weakly, She's been working," Victor said simply, his gaze never leaving mine. "Nothing more, nothing less. And now she's leaving with me." It wasn't a request. Victor's hand was warm against the small of my back as he guided me through the club's maze of corridors I'd never seen before. Staff-only areas that led to a private elevator I hadn't known existed. The silence between us felt heavier than the bass thumping through the walls, and I found myself studying his profile in the elevator's amber lighting. Sharp jawline, straight nose, and those dark eyes that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. "Where are we going?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere safe," he replied without looking at me. "Those men won't bother you again." The elevator opened directly into an underground garage where a black Mercedes sedan waited, its engine already running. A man in a dark suit stood beside the driver's door, his posture military straight. He nodded respectfully as we approached. "Good evening, Mr. Romano," the driver said, opening the rear door for us. As we settled into the leather seats, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window's reflection. My face was pale, my dark hair escaping from its ponytail, and my hands still trembled slightly. I looked exactly like what I was, a terrified waitress who'd stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. "You're probably wondering why those men thought you were a spy," Victor said, breaking the silence as the car pulled out onto the rain-slicked streets of downtown Chicago. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "They've been paranoid lately. Business has been complicated. They see threats everywhere, even where none exist. He paused, studying me with those penetrating dark eyes. But you're not a threat, are you, Vanessa? The fact that he knew my name sent another chill through me. How do you... I know a lot of things, he said simply. I know you've been working at the Golden Velvet for 3 months. I know you lost your previous job at Midwestern Insurance when they downsized. I know you live alone in a studio apartment on Ashland Avenue, and you're 2 months behind on rent. Each fact hit me like a physical blow. You've been watching me. I've been watching everyone who works in my establishments, he corrected. It's a matter of security. But yes, I've been particularly interested in you. Your establishments? The pieces began clicking together in my mind. You own the Golden Velvet. Among other things. Victor's smile was slight, almost predatory. I own several businesses in the city, legitimate ones mostly. The word mostly hung in the air between us like a warning. What do you want from me? I asked, my hands clenched in my lap. Nothing you're not willing to give, he replied, but something in his tone suggested that my willingness might not be entirely relevant to the equation. The car pulled up in front of my apartment building, the same rundown structure I'd called home for the past year. But as I looked up at my 4th-floor window, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The light was on. I always turn off the lights, I whispered, more to myself than to Victor. I know, he said quietly. That's why we're not going up there tonight. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He answered it with a curt, Romano, then listened for several seconds, his expression growing darker. I see, he said finally. Clean it up. I want them gone within the hour. He ended the call and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Your apartment has been searched, thoroughly. They were looking for evidence of your supposed espionage activities. My apartment? The violation felt almost physical. They were in my home? Alessandro Torino's men have no concept of boundaries, Victor said with disgust. That's why they're about to learn a very painful lesson about respecting what's mine. What's yours? I repeated, the implication sinking in slowly. You came to my club. You work in my establishment. Those men threatened you on my property. His voice was matter of fact, as if he were discussing the weather. That makes you my responsibility. The car began moving again, and I realized I had no idea where we were going. The city lights blurred past the window as we headed toward the more affluent neighborhoods on the north side. I don't understand any of this, I said, exhaustion beginning to replace fear. I just served them drinks. I didn't ask questions. I didn't spy on anyone. I don't even know what they do for a living. They traffic in things that shouldn't be trafficked, Victor said simply. Drugs, weapons, people. The kind of business that makes men paranoid and violent. And you? I asked, surprised by my own boldness. What kind of business are you in? Victor was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. I provide services, protection, mediation, problem solving. I help people who can't go to the police with their difficulties. So you're a criminal too. I'm a businessman, he corrected. The distinction is important, though perhaps subtle. The car turned into a gated driveway, and I found myself staring up at a mansion that belonged in a different world than the one I inhabited. Tudor-style architecture with perfectly manicured grounds, security cameras discreetly positioned at regular intervals, and the kind of understated elegance that whispered rather than shouted about wealth. This is where you live? I asked. One of several places, yes. Victor stepped out of the car and extended his hand to help me. You'll be staying here tonight, possibly longer, depending on how quickly Alessandro's paranoia can be managed. As we walked toward the front entrance, I became acutely aware of the security presence. Men in dark suits positioned strategically around the property, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings, original artwork, furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. But there was something cold about it, as if it were a museum rather than a place where someone actually lived. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your room," Victor said, gesturing to an elegant Asian woman who appeared as if summoned. "She'll provide you with anything you need." "Mr. Romano," I said as he turned to leave. "Why are you helping me?" He paused at the bottom of a grand staircase, his hand resting on the ornate banister. "Because, Vanessa, you've found yourself caught in a war you didn't even know existed. And in wars, innocent people need protection. And if I want to leave?" His smile was enigmatic, neither warm nor entirely cold. "Where would you go? Your apartment has been compromised. Your job at the club is no longer safe. Alessandro's men now consider you a threat, whether you are one or not." He spread his hands in a gesture that managed to be both helpless and threatening. Sometimes protection and imprisonment can look remarkably similar from the outside. As Mrs. Chen led me upstairs to what would be my gilded cage, I caught a glimpse of Victor through the doorway of what appeared to be his study. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, his voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested lives hung in the balance of his decisions. I was no longer just Vanessa Vaughn, struggling waitress trying to make rent. I had become a piece on a chessboard in a game I didn't understand, protected by a man whose protection might be more dangerous than the threats he was shielding me from. The room Mrs. Chen showed me to was larger than my entire apartment, with windows that overlooked the estate's gardens and Lake Michigan beyond. Luxury surrounded me: Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, a view that belonged in a magazine. But the windows had locks that only opened from the outside, and I was quite certain that the well-dressed men patrolling the grounds weren't there solely for my protection. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of my beautiful prison, I wondered what price Victor Romano would eventually expect me to pay for his protection. I woke to the sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air, the rhythmic thump growing louder until it seemed to shake the entire house. Through my bedroom window, I watched as a sleek black aircraft settled onto a landing pad I hadn't noticed the night before, its presence yet another reminder of just how far I'd fallen down this particular rabbit hole. Mrs. Chen had left fresh clothes on my dresser, designer pieces that fit perfectly, which should have been comforting, but instead felt ominous. How did they know my exact measurements? How long had they been planning for my arrival? The breakfast waiting for me in the sunroom was elaborate enough to feed a family. Fresh fruit, pastries from what I suspected was a French bakery, coffee that smelled like it cost more per pound than I used to make in a week. But my stomach was too twisted with anxiety to appreciate the luxury. "You didn't eat much," Victor observed, appearing in the doorway with the silent grace that seemed to characterize his every movement. He was dressed more casually today, dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous than the formal suit had. "I'm not particularly hungry," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the coffee cup for warmth. "Being kidnapped tends to affect my appetite." Kidnapped. He considered the word as he settled into the chair across from me. "Is that what you think this is? What would you call it?" I met his gaze, surprised by my own boldness. "I can't leave, can I?" "You can leave any time you want," Victor said simply. "But leaving would be inadvisable. Alessandro's people are still looking for you. They've been to your apartment 3 more times since last night." The casual way he delivered this information sent ice through my veins. "How do you know that?" "Because I have people watching your apartment. And them." He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed despite discussing what amounted to a surveillance operation. "Knowledge is survival in my world, Vanessa. The more I know about potential threats, the better I can protect what's important to me. And I'm important to you? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Victor's smile was enigmatic. You're under my protection. That makes you very important indeed. Before I could ask what that meant, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister Sarah in Portland. Haven't heard from you in days. Everything okay? Victor noticed my frown. Family? My sister. She worries when I don't check in regularly. I started to type a response, but Victor's hand covered mine, stopping me. What were you going to tell her? That I'm fine. That work's been busy. I looked at him suspiciously. Why? Because your phone is being monitored. Not by me, he added quickly, seeing my expression. Alessandro's people have been tracking your communications since yesterday. Anything you say to your sister could put her in danger. The phone felt suddenly hot in my hand. You're saying they'd hurt my family. Men like Alessandro don't distinguish between primary targets and collateral damage, Victor said quietly. Your sister, her husband, their 2 children. They would all be considered leverage if Alessandro decided you had information he needed. But I don't have any information. The words came out louder than I'd intended, tinged with desperation. I don't know anything about his business or anyone else's business. I just serve drinks. I know that. Victor's voice was gentle, almost soothing. But Alessandro doesn't. And until he can be convinced otherwise, everyone connected to you is potentially at risk. I thought about Sarah's kids. Emma, age 6, and little Marcus, barely 3. The idea of them being threatened because of something I'd supposedly done made my stomach lurch. What do you suggest? I asked quietly. Nothing for now. Let me handle Alessandro. Victor's tone carried the weight of absolute certainty. But there's something else we need to discuss. He pulled a manila folder from somewhere and set it on the table between us. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots of me at the club, walking to work, entering my apartment building. But these weren't recent. Some of them looked like they'd been taken months ago. You've been watching me for a long time, I said, my voice hollow. Not me personally, Victor clarified. But yes, you've been of interest to my organization. Why? Victor was quiet for a long moment, studying my face as if trying to decide how much truth I could handle. 3 months ago, you applied for a job at Midwest Insurance where you worked for 8 months before they downsized. I nodded, unsure where this was going. What you didn't know was that Midwest Insurance was laundering money for several criminal organizations, including Alessandro's. Victor's fingers drummed silently on the table. When the FBI started investigating, the company had to close quickly. Employees were let go with minimal notice to prevent them from asking questions about irregularities they might have noticed. I never noticed any irregularities, I protested. No, you didn't. But Alessandro doesn't know that. When his accountant told him that a former Midwest employee was now working at one of my establishments, he became paranoid. He assumed you were either working for me or for law enforcement. The pieces were finally clicking into place. So, last night, was Alessandro testing his theory? If you'd been a spy, you would have had training, backup, a way to handle confrontation. Instead, you were exactly what you appeared to be, a terrified young woman in over her head. And now? Now Alessandro knows you're not a spy, but he also knows you're under my protection, which creates a different kind of problem. Victor leaned forward slightly. He sees you as a potential weakness he can exploit. As long as you're connected to me, you're a target. Then let me go, I said immediately. I'll leave Chicago. I'll go stay with my sister until this blows over. It won't blow over. Victor's voice was firm. Men like Alessandro don't forget perceived slights. He was humiliated last night when I intervened. That's not something he'll let pass. So what are you suggesting? Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where his security team maintained their vigilant patrol. "I'm suggesting that you consider a more permanent arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "Move in here, officially. Let it be known that you're not just under my protection. You're part of my household." He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "It would solve several problems at once." "And create others," I pointed out. "Undoubtedly." Victor's smile was slight but genuine. "But the problems it would create are ones I'm equipped to handle. The current situation is more volatile." I thought about my tiny apartment with its broken heater and neighbors who played music too loud. I thought about my job at the club, the drunk customers and the constant worry about tips. I thought about Sarah and her family, potentially in danger because of me. "What would you expect in return?" I asked carefully. "Loyalty, discretion, your presence at certain social functions where having a companion would be advantageous." Victor paused. "Nothing you're not comfortable with." "And if I say no?" "Then I continue to provide protection while we look for alternative solutions." "But Vanessa," his voice grew serious, "there may not be any alternative solutions. Not ones that keep you and your family safe." The weight of the decision pressed down on me. Stay here, in this beautiful prison, under the protection of a man whose business dealings were only marginally more legal than those of the men hunting me. Or try to return to my old life, knowing that every day could bring new threats to myself and everyone I cared about. "I need time to think," I said finally. "Of course." Victor moved toward the door, then paused. "Vanessa, for what it's worth, I give you my word that you'll be safe here. Whatever else I am, I'm a man who keeps his promises." As he left me alone with my thoughts and the weight of an impossible choice, I found myself wondering if Victor Romano's promises were a blessing or a curse. The decision was made for me at 3:17 a.m., when Mrs. Chen woke me with gentle but urgent hands shaking my shoulder. Through the fog of interrupted sleep, I heard voices in the hallway. Victor's, low and commanding, mixed with others I didn't recognize. The tone was businesslike but tense, the kind of conversation that meant someone's life was about to change irrevocably. "Miss Vaughn," Mrs. Chen whispered, "you need to get dressed quickly. Mr. Romano wants to see you in his study." I pulled on the silk robe she handed me, my heart already racing. Nothing good ever happened at 3 a.m. As we walked through the darkened hallways, I caught glimpses of increased security presence. More men in suits, checking weapons, speaking into earpieces with the practiced efficiency of people preparing for war. Victor's study was ablaze with light despite the early hour. He stood behind his desk, still fully dressed, studying multiple computer screens that showed what appeared to be surveillance footage from various locations around the city. His hair was slightly mussed, the first sign of imperfection I'd seen in his carefully controlled appearance. "Sit," he said without looking up, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I remained standing. "What's happening?" Alessandro made his move. Victor finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Worry. 3 hours ago, his men broke into your sister's house in Portland. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Sarah? The kids? Are they—" "They're fine," Victor said quickly. "My people got there first. Your sister and her family are currently in a safe house in Seattle, under the protection of associates of mine. They think they're part of a witness protection program." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by rage. How dare he threaten my family? "Alessandro is desperate," Victor explained, coming around the desk to perch on its edge in front of me. "The FBI investigation into Midwest Insurance has made him paranoid about information leaks. He's convinced you know something that could implicate him." "But I don't know anything." "I know that. You know that. but Alessandro has decided that the only way to be certain is to eliminate any possible threats. Victor's voice was gentle but implacable. That includes you and anyone you might have confided in. The full scope of the nightmare I'd stumbled into was beginning to crystallize. My family can't live in hiding forever. No, they can't. But they'll have to until Alessandro is no longer a threat. And when will that be? Victor was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. That depends on several factors. Most importantly, it depends on you. What do you mean? Alessandro's paranoia is focused on you specifically because he believes you have information. The only way to convince him definitively that you don't is to make it clear that you're not in a position to use any information against him. I still don't understand. Victor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the pre-dawn darkness. If you were to become my companion, officially, publicly, it would send a clear message that your loyalties lie elsewhere. Alessandro would have no reason to fear you as an FBI informant if you were obviously committed to someone in his world. The implication sank in slowly. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. I want you to be my girlfriend, Victor corrected. There's a difference. Pretending would be too dangerous. Alessandro has people everywhere. Any deception would eventually be discovered. So you're proposing that I actually, what? Fall in love with you on command? Victor's smile was slight, but not unkind. I'm proposing that you allow yourself to be courted, that you give us both the chance to see what might develop naturally. In the meantime, the appearance of a relationship would provide protection for both you and your family. I thought about Sarah, probably terrified and confused in some strange safe house, trying to explain to her children why they couldn't go home. I thought about little Emma asking when they could see Aunt Vanessa again. What would this relationship entail? I asked carefully. Public appearances, dinners, social events, charity functions. You'd need to learn about my world, meet my associates, play the part convincingly. Victor paused. Privately, you'd have your own space, your own privacy. Nothing would happen between us that you didn't want to happen. And my family would remain under protection as long as necessary. Your sister would be told that you're involved in an ongoing federal investigation and can't be contacted directly for their safety. It's not entirely untrue. The manipulation was elegant in its simplicity. Victor was offering me everything I needed: safety for my family, protection for myself, a life of luxury I'd never imagined. All in exchange for my freedom and the possibility of something more intimate developing between us. You've thought this through very carefully, I observed. It's what I do, Victor admitted. But Vanessa, I want you to understand something. This isn't just a strategic move for me. I've been watching you for months, yes, but not just for security reasons. You're different, genuine in a way that's rare in my world. Different how? You could have tried to leverage your position last night. Could have demanded money, made threats, attempted to bargain. Instead, you just wanted to go home and forget any of this happened. Victor moved closer, his voice dropping. That kind of authenticity is precious and dangerous in its own way. Dangerous to whom? To men like me, who've forgotten what genuine innocence looks like. The admission hung in the air between us, more intimate than any physical touch. For a moment, I saw past the perfectly controlled exterior to something more human underneath. If I agree to this, I said slowly, how do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know this isn't just another kind of prison? You don't, Victor said simply. You'll have to trust me, and I'll have to trust you. It's not a perfect solution, but it's the only one that keeps everyone alive. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. Somewhere in Seattle, my sister was probably awake, holding her children and wondering what had happened to their safe, predictable life. Somewhere in Chicago, Alessandro's men were probably planning their next move, convinced that I held secrets worth killing for. "I'll need some guarantees," I said finally. "Name them." "My family stays protected, no matter what happens between us. If this arrangement ends, if I disappoint you somehow, they don't pay the price." "Agreed. I want to be able to contact my sister, even if it's through intermediaries. She needs to know I'm alive and safe." "Also agreed. And I want your word that you'll never use my family's safety as leverage against me. Whatever this becomes, whatever decisions I make, they remain untouchable." Victor was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him considering the implications of what I was asking. I was essentially demanding that he give up his most powerful tool for ensuring my compliance. "You have my word," he said finally. "Your family's protection is unconditional." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where his security team maintained their constant vigil. The life I'd known was over, whether I agreed to his proposal or not. The question was whether I was brave enough to step into an unknown future with a man who was offering me protection in exchange for the possibility of something more. "All right," I said, turning back to face him. "I'll try. But Victor, if you betray my trust, if you hurt my family or use them against me, I'll find a way to destroy you. I may not know anything about your business now, but I'm a quick learner." Victor's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. I wouldn't expect anything less. "Welcome to my world, Vanessa." As he moved closer, I realized that I'd just agreed to let a dangerous man court me while my life hung in the balance. The smart part of my brain was screaming warnings, but the part that had been lonely for too long was whispering possibilities. Either way, there was no going back now. 6 weeks into our arrangement, I discovered that Victor Romano's world was far more complex and dangerous than even my worst fears had imagined. It started with a simple dinner party, or what Victor called simple, though it involved a catered meal for 30 people, a string quartet, and more security personnel than some small countries employed. I was adjusting the diamond necklace Victor had given me earlier that day when Mrs. Chen knocked on my bedroom door. The jewelry was real, of course, worth more than my family's house in Portland, and wearing it felt like carrying a beautiful, expensive weight that constantly reminded me of my new reality. "Miss Vaughn," Mrs. Chen said softly, "Mr. Romano would like to see you in his study before the guests arrive." I found Victor standing in front of a wall of monitors, each showing different camera feeds from around the city. He was dressed impeccably in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, but there was tension in his shoulders that I'd learned to recognize over the past weeks. "Is everything all right?" I asked, moving to stand beside him. "Define all right," he said grimly, pointing to one of the screens. "Alessandro has been busy." The camera showed what appeared to be a warehouse, with several men loading unmarked boxes into trucks. Even I could tell this wasn't legitimate business. The furtive movements, the late hour, the lack of any identifying marks on the vehicles. What am I looking at? Alessandro's new venture. He's expanded beyond money laundering into human trafficking. Victor's voice carried a disgust that seemed deeply personal. Young women from Eastern Europe promised legitimate work in America. My stomach turned. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because 3 of the women he's trafficking are being kept in a building 2 blocks from where your sister works in Portland. He knows where she is, Vanessa. He's sending me a message." The necklace suddenly felt like a noose around my throat. "He's threatening her again?" "Not threatening, positioning. Alessandro is many things, but he's not stupid. He knows that a direct attack on your family would bring down my full retaliation. But if something were to happen to these women, if there were to be a police raid on the building where they're being held." Victor turned to face me. "Your sister works for a nonprofit that helps immigrant women. She'd be one of the first responders to any crisis involving trafficked victims." The implications hit me like cold water. He'd put her in danger without directly targeting her. And if anything happened to her during such an incident, it would look like tragic collateral damage rather than a deliberate attack. Victor's hands clenched into fists at his sides. It's actually quite clever. What are we going to do? Victor's smile was sharp and entirely without warmth. We're going to remind Alessandro why it's unwise to threaten my family. The word family sent an unexpected warmth through me, even in the midst of crisis. Over the past weeks, Victor had been slowly drawing me into his inner circle, introducing me to his world with careful patience. I'd learned that his business empire included legitimate enterprises, restaurants, construction companies, import-export operations. But I'd also learned that the line between legitimate and illegitimate was often thinner than I'd imagined. Tonight's dinner party, Victor continued, isn't just a social gathering. It's a council of war. An hour later, I found myself playing hostess to some of the most dangerous people I'd ever encountered. They looked like successful business people, expensive clothes, perfect manners, the kind of polish that came with money and power. But there was something predatory about the way they moved, the way they assessed each other and their surroundings. Vanessa, Victor said, placing his hand on the small of my back as he guided me toward a distinguished older man with silver hair and kind eyes. I'd like you to meet Judge Morrison. Judge Morrison smiled warmly and kissed my hand with old-world gallantry. A pleasure, my dear. Victor has told me so much about you. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. A sitting federal judge, at a dinner party hosted by a man whose business dealings operated in legal gray areas at best. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Judge Morrison has been a family friend for many years, Victor explained, his hand remaining protectively on my back. His insights into legal matters have been invaluable. Translation: Victor owned a federal judge. The evening continued with similar revelations. The police chief who joked about traffic tickets while accepting an envelope that clearly contained more than party favors. The city councilwoman who discussed zoning permits with the kind of specificity that suggested prior arrangement. The FBI agent who seemed to know far more about Alessandro's operations than should have been possible through official channels. By the time dessert was served, I realized I was witnessing something extraordinary and terrifying. A shadow government operating within the legitimate one, bound together by mutual benefit and shared secrets. Overwhelming, isn't it? A voice said beside me. I turned to find Elena Castellanos, Victor's sister, settling into the chair next to mine. She was beautiful in the same sharp-edged way Victor was handsome, with dark eyes that missed nothing. A little, I admitted. Victor doesn't usually introduce outsiders to the family business, Elena observed, sipping her wine. The fact that you're here, wearing his jewelry, meeting his associates, it means he sees a future with you. Does it? My brother doesn't do anything casually. Every relationship, every alliance, every enemy, they're all calculated moves in a larger game. Elena studied my face carefully. The question is whether you understand what game you're playing. Before I could respond, Victor appeared at my shoulder. Elena, stop interrogating my girlfriend. I'm not interrogating, Elena protested innocently. I'm bonding. It's what sisters do. Sisters-in-law, Victor corrected, and I felt my breath catch. Eventually. The casual way he said it, as if discussing the weather, sent a thrill of something. Fear, excitement, possibility, through me. This was the first time he'd mentioned anything permanent, anything beyond the current arrangement. Victor, I started, but he was already being pulled away by Judge Morrison, who needed to discuss something urgent in private. Elena watched him go, then turned back to me with a smile that was both sympathetic and calculating. Welcome to the family, Vanessa. Try not to get killed. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the staff had cleaned up, I found Victor in his study again, this time examining what appeared to be building schematics. The warehouse where Alessandro is keeping those women, he explained without looking up. We're going to extract them tomorrow night. We? My people. I'll be coordinating from here. Victor finally looked at me, his expression serious. This is what I do, Vanessa. This is who I am. I'm not just protecting you from Alessandro. I'm actively working to destroy him. And the women? Will be free. The ones who want to return home will be helped to do so safely. The ones who want to stay will be given legitimate jobs and documentation. Victor's voice softened. No one deserves to be treated as property. I thought about my sister, unknowingly working 2 blocks away from where these women were being held. I thought about the federal judge and the police chief, the careful web of influence and obligation that allowed Victor to operate with impunity. What happens after Alessandro is gone? I asked. There will be someone else. There always is. Victor moved closer, his hand coming up to cut my cheek. But they'll know that my family is off limits. That you are off limits. Is that what I am? Family? You're whatever you want to be, Victor said quietly. But yes, you're family. You've been family since the moment you agreed to trust me. As he leaned down to kiss me, the first real kiss we'd shared since this began, I realized that Elena had been right about one thing. I was playing a game whose rules I barely understood, with stakes higher than I'd ever imagined. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I was starting to think I might actually want to win. The call came at dawn, 3 days after Victor's people had successfully extracted the trafficked women from Alessandro's warehouse. I was already awake, standing by the window in what had become our bedroom. Victor and I had stopped pretending about separate sleeping arrangements 2 weeks ago, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan. Victor's phone rang with the sharp insistence that meant emergency, and I watched his face transform from sleepy contentment to cold alertness as he answered. When? He said sharply. How many? A pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. What is it? I asked, though I already knew from his expression that our fragile peace had been shattered. Alessandro made his move, Victor said grimly, already pulling on clothes. He hit 3 of my businesses simultaneously, the restaurant in Little Italy, the construction office downtown, and... He paused, his jaw tightening. The children's hospital where my foundation provides funding. The hospital? My blood went cold. There are sick children there. Exactly. He's escalating beyond business into terrorism. Victor strapped on a shoulder holster with practiced efficiency. He wants to draw me out into the open. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. Victor's voice brooked no argument. You stay here where it's safe. I have Elena flying in from New York to stay with you. Victor, I'm not helpless. You can stay alive, he interrupted, gripping my shoulders. Because if something happens to you, if Alessandro gets his hands on you, I'll burn this entire city down to get you back. And a lot of innocent people will die in the process. The raw intensity in his voice, the barely controlled violence simmering beneath his calm exterior, reminded me of just how dangerous the man I'd fallen in love with really was. He kissed me hard, desperately, as if it might be the last time. I love you, he said against my lips. I should have said it sooner. Victor. But he was already gone, leaving me alone with the weight of words that changed everything. Elena arrived an hour later with enough firepower to outfit a small army and a grim expression that matched my own mood. She found me in Victor's study, watching the news coverage of the attacks with growing horror. The restaurant fire killed 2 people, I said without turning around. A busboy and a customer who couldn't get out in time. I know, Elena said quietly, settling into the chair beside mine. Victor knows too. That's why he's going to end this today. What do you mean? Alessandro crossed a line when he targeted civilians. Victor has been playing by certain rules, trying to minimize collateral damage. But when someone threatens innocence... Elena's smile was sharp and predatory. All bets are off. The morning passed in tense silence, broken only by periodic updates from Victor's people. Alessandro's men had barricaded themselves in their headquarters, a fortified building in an industrial district that had once been a legitimate shipping company. Victor was coordinating a siege, but Alessandro had apparently learned from Victor's tactics and was prepared for a long standoff. At noon, everything changed. "Miss Vaughn," Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her usually calm demeanor showing cracks of anxiety. "There's a phone call for you. The man says it's about your sister." My blood turned to ice. Sarah was supposed to be safe, hidden away where Alessandro couldn't reach her. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. "Vanessa?" The voice was unfamiliar, heavily accented. "This is Alessandro Torino." "Where is my sister?" I demanded, Elena immediately moving to listen in. "Safe for now. But her safety, and the safety of her children, depends entirely on your cooperation." "What do you want?" "I want you to convince your lover to call off his dogs. My building is surrounded, but I have assets he doesn't know about. Assets that include a very frightened young woman and 2 small children." The room tilted around me. Somehow, impossibly, Alessandro had found Sarah despite all of Victor's precautions. "You're lying." "Little Emma asks for her Aunt Vanessa every day. She wants to know when she can go home." Alessandro's voice carried a cold amusement. "Would you like to speak to her?" "Mommy, why are the bad men here?" Emma's voice, small and frightened, came through the phone like a knife to my heart. "Emma, baby, are you okay?" I managed to choke out. "I want to go home, Aunt Nessa. I want Daddy." The phone was taken away before I could say anything else. Alessandro's voice returned, supremely confident. "1 hour, Miss Vaughn. Tell Victor Romano that he has 1 hour to withdraw his people and allow me safe passage out of the city. If he doesn't, your family dies, and their blood will be on his hands." The line went dead. Elena was already on her phone, speaking rapidly in Italian to what I assumed were Victor's people. When she hung up, her face was pale but determined. "How?" I asked numbly. "How did he get to them?" "Someone inside the Federal Protection Detail," Elena said grimly. "Alessandro has been planning this for weeks, probably since the moment Victor first intervened at the club. We have to tell Victor. Already done. He's..." Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's very angry." 20 minutes later, Victor burst through the door like a force of nature, his carefully controlled exterior completely stripped away. This was the man Alessandro's people feared, the predator beneath the polish. "Where?" was all he said. "A warehouse on the south side," Elena reported. "Our people have it under surveillance, but they can't get close without risking the hostages." "How many men does he have?" "At least a dozen, maybe more." Victor was silent for a long moment, and I could see him calculating angles, assessing options, weighing the lives of my family against the strategic implications of different choices. "There's another way," I said quietly. Both siblings looked at me. "I go in. I trade myself for them. Alessandro wants leverage over you, Victor. I'm better leverage than a woman and 2 children he has to keep hidden." "No," Victor said immediately. "Absolutely not." "He won't hurt me immediately," I continued, ignoring his objection. "I'm too valuable as a bargaining chip. But Emma and Marcus, they're just liabilities to him now." "Vanessa, no, you can't save everyone," I said, reaching for his hands. "But you can save them. You can get my family out safely, and then you can come for me. I won't trade you for them. Then you'll lose all of us." I forced myself to meet his eyes, to speak with a confidence I didn't feel. "This is the only way, and you know it." Victor was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he fought against every protective instinct he possessed. Finally he spoke. "If I do this, if I let you walk into that warehouse, you need to understand something. I will get you back. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, whoever I have to kill, I will get you back." "I know," I whispered. "And when I do, when you're safe again, you're never leaving my side. We get married. You take my name. You become part of this family officially and permanently." Victor's voice was fierce, desperate. "Because I can't live through this kind of fear again." "Is that a proposal?" "It's a promise." Elena cleared her throat. "I hate to interrupt this touching moment, but we have 30 minutes to coordinate this exchange." The next half hour passed in a blur of preparation. Victor's people worked with military precision, positioning themselves around the warehouse while maintaining enough distance to avoid triggering Alessandro's paranoia. Victor himself would coordinate the exchange, using a combination of surveillance equipment and sheer force of will to ensure my safety. As we drove toward what might be my death, Victor held my hand with gentle desperation. "Remember," he said quietly, "whatever happens in there, whatever Alessandro says or does, you are mine. You belong to me, and I protect what's mine." "And you belong to me too," I replied, surprised by my own fierceness. "So don't you dare do anything stupid trying to rescue me." Victor's smile was sharp and predatory. "Sweetheart, stupid is the last thing Alessandro needs to worry about." The warehouse loomed ahead of us, dark and threatening against the afternoon sky. Somewhere inside, my family waited, probably terrified and confused. Somewhere inside, Alessandro Torino was making what would prove to be the last mistake of his life. As I walked toward the building, toward an uncertain future, I realized that the frightened waitress who had stumbled into this world was gone forever. In her place was a woman who understood power, who had claimed her place in Victor Romano's dangerous world, and who was prepared to fight for the family she'd found there. The game was almost over, and despite everything, I was determined to win.